like to turn our attention towards Samba and its implementation within Red Hat Enterprise Linux. We'll begin by exploring Samba Clients and then cruise on down to Samba Server and SWAT, the web-based administration tool, to wrap up our focus on the subject. Now, what exactly is Samba? For many years it's been all the rave within the Linux world, and it provides Windows features on Linux. So it allows your Linux box to look like a Windows box and to function like a Windows box with respect to file and print. So Windows features, namely file and print services on Linux, pipe Unix, since it works on Unix as well. With that said, let's take a look at what's implemented by default on the remote system with RPM query all grep I Samba. We'll see what's installed. We'll compare it to the package list that is available. Currently, two of the packages are installed, Common and Client. For all intents and purposes for this section, we'll focus on the client. However, on the server, note, if we Control F search for Samba, you'll find the Samba main package, which contains a server, as well as Samba SWAT, which is the web administration tool. So we have two of the four packages installed, but they're enough to cover the clients that are important. So with that said, let's RPM query list Samba Common, as items in the Common package belong to or are shared by the Samba client as well as the main Samba package, and so on. Here's an init D entry to WinBind in Samba Common. WinBind performs integration between Linux and Windows users, allowing Windows users the ability to log on and write files and apply permissions on a Linux file system using unique identifiers. A main Samba directory is maintained by this package. In it, there's an LM hosts file equivalent to LM hosts within Windows, where LAN manager hosts are placed with their IP addresses for translation or mappings between LAN manager host names and IP addresses. The primary Samba configuration file is also in etc Samba, and it is smb.conf. This is the primary file. It contains information used by the client and the server with respect to default domain shares, different protocols to use, etc. Now, because WinBind ties into authentication, there's a PAM entry as well as a driver for WinBind, one for Wins as well, and others. There are many utilities with the Samba package, the Common package, including the net utility, which allows us to join domains, amongst other things, NT-LAN manager authentication, and other important items such as SMB password, WB info, which lists users and groups on Windows systems such as Active Directory systems. Many man pages, caching, logging. Samba maintains its own log tree beneath var log Samba, where you'll find entries for connected clients and general system errors, as well as general system messages. So the Common package contains items shared by the other package, or the other packages. How about the Clients package? We did an RPM query all, and we saw that in addition to Common, there's a Client package. Let's RPM query list Samba Client. Here you'll see the clients that we will use to connect to a remote system to perform different functions such as getting files, putting files, enumerating the contents or the shares of remote systems, printing, so on and so forth. We see a list of items. There's a mount item for CIFS, for the Common Internet File System. This mount item, this binary, allows us to mount seamlessly or transparently into our file system a remote Samba share. So if on a Windows system, for example, we've published, let's say, a public directory, and we'd like to make that directory available in our directory tree, similar to what we've done with NFS and AutoFS, we can make reference to mount.cifs by using the mount command. And then there's the equivalent unmount, which will undo whatever mount does. There's find SMB, which looks up, it performs an NMB lookup, that is, and it finds hosts on the subnet, so it'll search the local subnet in search of Samba capable hosts. And let's just label this section clients and enumerate the ones that we're going to look at. So find SMB, and it finds Samba hosts or SMB hosts on the network and enumerates them, and you may execute it by just executing find SMB from a free shell. Let's find a separate window while we enumerate the contents. We'll drop this session and SSH as root over to Linux CBT serve 4. It picks up. Notice we're using the IPv6 address, and we'll be connecting momentarily with IPv6. So find SMB run with no options will attempt to scour the network and find a local LAN manager group. None was found at this particular stage. Sometimes the information isn't available immediately. It uses UDP, and the protocol, that is Samba, uses UDP to maintain the browse list. Sometimes it's not available. Currently we see no information. NMB lookup, which looks up NetBIOS hosts, and other utilities such as SMB get, which allows you to get files from a remote Samba share. Continuing down the list, we see SMB print, SMB spool, which allows us to print items to remote Samba printers, SMB tar, which allows us to tar files on a remote share, and SMB tree, which is equivalent to network neighborhood. It prints workgroups, hosts, and shares, and can be run alone similarly to find SMB, and often returns more useful information. The password that it's prompting us for is to be able to browse the network using Windows credentials or LAN manager type credentials. If you don't specify a password, anonymous will be used. So let's go ahead and not indicate a password and see what SMB tree comes back with. And notice it's found items, unlike find SMB. So another client, which is SMB tree, is equivalent to network neighborhood in older versions of Windows, or My Network Places in newer versions of Windows. It enumerates workgroups, so it prints workgroups, hosts, and shares of remote systems. And again, looking at what was produced, we see that there is a workgroup named Linux Genius, and it contains a Windows system, Linux CBT Win1. That system contains multiple shares. Temp, the default print, mtemp, which we probably used during one of our lessons, hidden shares for the different hard drives, M, L, and C, a LaserJet printer, albeit an older one, the default admin and IPC hidden shares. These are all shares that are available on the box for us to make use of. So SMB tree was able to find at least one NetBIOS host. And again, armed with this information, we can then make requests using the other Samba clients, such as SMB get. So that leads us to the next utility, that's SMB get. SMB get is similar to wget, with the difference being SMB get focuses on Samba-related shares, while wget focuses on internet URLs such as HTTP and FTP. So it's similar to wget in that it will download files from the remote share. So of course we need to confirm that a share exists and that there are items to download, and then use SMB get, which leads us to yet another client, and that's SMB client. This is a general purpose interactive utility, so interactive utility to connect to shares. So using a combination of SMB tree and SMB client, you can connect to and download and upload items. Now, SMB client allows you to upload and download to and from shares. So it permits uploading as well as download from shares. And the way you use it is pretty straightforward. SMB client followed by uppercase U followed by the name of the user you should connect to the remote system as. So you determine who that user is, the credentials, and you supply a password, and then you'll be able to connect and interact with the remote system. So let's try to log in as myself, followed by using forward slashes instead of backslashes, since backslashes are escaped, or double backslashes means one. Forward slash, which isn't escaped, the name of the server, and the name of the share. But again, we need to ensure that there's something worthy or something on the share that's worth downloading. So let's use SMB client. We'll connect to the mtemp share. We'll just double check that again. That is indeed called mtemp. It contains a couple documents, and we'll be able to download those documents. We'll also have a file handy for upload. So let's navigate to our home directory and find something that's worth uploading. And here's a file, the router config. So we'll execute SMB client with the username, the path, which includes the server name and share name. This performs a lookup of the remote system Linux CBT Win2. Now, if the DNS server doesn't respond with the appropriate information, then the SMB client utility, just like Windows utilities, will use broadcasting. But here we indicated the wrong host. It's Linux CBT Win1. Notice immediately the server has responded with a prompt for the password to connect to the share as a user dean. So providing we supply the appropriate password, we'll have a session. Here it is. This is the interactive session, which reveals that the server is running Vista Ultimate. With that said, we may then execute ls, not -l, that's using FTP or a Linux or Unix shell. And then we see two files which may be downloaded. Let's go ahead and download the SAN allocations file using mget. Now, within the SMB client interface, if you type help, you'll see that the options are very similar to LFTP as well as FTP. So it's an FTP-like interactive interface. So interactive FTP-like utility to connect to shares, and it permits uploads and downloads from the shares. So let's go ahead and mget, Control-Shift-V, pasting the file, and globbing is supported, by the way. This will download the document to our local directory. And we can confirm as such once this has completed, and we see the average transfer rate, 1.4 KB per second, very slow. But we can confirm as such using exclamation ls, and we'll see the file is available. Now let's upload something to the remote server, this router config file, using input, and momentarily after we've confirmed, the file will be updated. Now in this case, mtemp must be a share that is restricted. In other words, we're not able to write to the share, so we'd have to alter the permissions in order to be able to upload, which is fine. That's just simply a permissions issue. But otherwise, you'd simply use input to upload the file. So once we've connected, mget file star downloads file or files, depending on how many. And conversely, input file star uploads file or files, depending on how many. So again, SMB client is this interactive utility which allows you to pull items from the remote server. However, if you know the name, the actual name of a file that you'd like to download, similar to using wget, then an easier utility to use is SMB get. So we mentioned it in number 3. Let's show you how you use it. SMB get. This supposes that you know what you'd like to download. User, the name of the user, the path with an SMB prefix, the name of the server, which is Win1, the share, which is mtemp, followed by the path to the file, which is in the current or in that directory. This will download the file to the local directory, wherever we are. Let's take a look. From the shell, we'll remove our local instance of the file and then try to download it. Of course, it prompts us. We need to authenticate, and then the file will be downloaded. And let's take a look. There it is. So it was re-downloaded. and it happens to be an open Office file. So SMB client, providing you authenticate, will download the item to the current directory. If you SMB get --help, you'll see the various options. Unlike SMB client, SMB get expects lowercase u followed by the username, and will also take a password on the shell. It also supports other options. The resume feature, the also important resume feature, which allows you to pick up where you left off. Again, this can save you in terms of how much time is required to download information to your local system. So let's just recap some of the utilities thus far. Well, some of the features. Samba provides Windows features on Linux and Unix systems. And some of those features include the ability to share files, as well as folders, as well as to print to and from Windows systems. So in essence, Samba makes your Linux system look like a Windows system. Its primary configuration file is located beneath etc Samba. It's named smb.conf. And in there later on, when we look at the server configuration, we'll see where the default workgroup as well as all the shares are laid out. There are numerous clients that are installed as part of the Samba-Clients package, including Find SMB, which tries to find SMB hosts on the network, SMB Tree, which is equivalent to Network Neighborhood and My Network Places, SMB Get, which is similar to wget in that it takes a URL with a prefix of SMB // and the full path to the file name, including the host name, the share name. Then there's SMB Client, which is an interactive utility which allows us to gain access to a share and perform uploads and downloads, just like you can with LFTP or FTP. And of course, there's still numerous other utilities. We did mention that there's SMB tar. It allows you to back up an item on a remote share or an entire share altogether. For example, supposing you have a backup script which runs on Linux that you'd like to execute daily through cron or via cron, which backs up a remote SMB share. Use SMB tar, perfect utility. Perhaps combine it with gzip or bzip version 2 to yield a great level of compression if the data aren't already compressed. So SMB tar backs up SMB shares to a tar archive or a tape archive, and its usage is very simple. SMB tar, the name of the server indicated using -s, which is Linux CBT Win1, -x to indicate the name of the share, which is mtemp. This is what will be backed up. The name of the user with which to authenticate, Dean, and the name of the file to create, which we'll call backup.tar or backup1.tar. And again, no need to memorize any of the options for the utilities. Simply, for most, if not all, Linux utilities execute SMB or name of the utility with help, and you'll see the options we've just described. -s indicates the server. -x indicates the share. As well as, and that's the small x here, as well as -u indicates the user. -t indicates the name of the file or the tar archive to create. But again, this will back up the entire share, so beware or be warned if it's big, be sure to have enough space. For our root file system, we have 1.9 gigabytes. We need to be sure there's enough space. Now, again, there are multiple files on the remote system, so perhaps mtemp isn't the appropriate share. Maybe there's another share that's of interest, or perhaps we want just a specific file, or we'll start the process and break it. In either case, let's go ahead and attempt to back up the remote share on the remote system. And in this case, it's come back very quickly because we didn't indicate a password. So let's try it again. We'll SMB tar, and we'll put our password on the line using the P option. And you can indicate your password between single quotes if you'd like. But it's currently ABC123, which will of course change. And now it's going to create a backup of the entire share. So if your share contains gigabytes, be prepared to have gigabytes available to facilitate the backup. You can break it at any point, or you can observe its progress from a different shell. So let's take a look at the backup1 tar file. It's now up to 75 megabytes and growing. File backup1 tar tells us it's a tar archive, which means a tar TVF will tell us what's involved. Now, as you can see, there's a big ISO image that's included, in the tar archive, which is taking the bulk of the space. Otherwise, the SAN allocation file has been rolled into the tar archive. And again, this is still growing. LSLTRH shows it's now at 246 megs, and again, we're going to kill it in the interest of saving time. So again, SMB tar is another utility. Indicate the password on the command line, and it will back up the item for you. Which SMB tar, by the item we mean share, and there's an exclude mode, so if you wanted to exclude a specific file, you could, using globbing for example, so we could -X followed by a pattern for a file to exclude or multiple files to exclude. Which SMB tar tells us it's in user S or user bin and RPM query F. User bin SMB tar will tell us the package memberships ship momentarily, and that is Samba Client. So again, RPM query list, Samba Client reveals the various utilities. And remember, the Samba Clients will make or take full advantage of DNS as well as WINS as well as broadcast resolution, just like a Windows system. So it will find your Linux hosts. Use SMB tree to begin with no password, and you'll see the hosts out there. Use it with a password that applies to all of your systems, and you'll see the shares on those systems as well, and you'll know where you can at least start. So quite a few little utilities. Find SMB, SMB tree, SMB get, SMB client. The main one is SMB client, as well as SMB tar, and we will use these utilities while we continue to study how Samba works as a server, as well as how to alter its configuration using SWAT in upcoming studies.